My son grabbed my hand in a parking lot and whispered, "Mom, don't turn around." I didn't know why. I just listened. 20 minutes later, I realized my husband had been lying to me. The woman living in my house wasn't who she claimed to be, and something meant for my child was already being taken. That was the moment everything changed. My son squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thin and urgent, "don't turn around. Just walk." We were in the parking lot, the wide concrete sprawl that always felt louder than it should. Carts rattled, engines coughed. Somewhere, a car alarm chirped and died. I hadn't even lifted my keys yet when his fingers locked around mine, cold and shaking. "Why?" I asked, keeping my eyes forward. "Please," he said, "just go." Behind us, a familiar voice rose above the noise, clear, confident, too close. "Wait, Sarah? Is that you?" I didn't answer. I didn't speed up either. I did the one thing my body understood in that moment. I kept moving at the same pace, straight ahead, like nothing had happened at all. My son stayed glued to my side, his shoulder pressed against my arm. He didn't look back. Neither did I. We reached the automatic doors and they sighed open, warm air rolling over us. The noise shifted from engines to voices, from open sky to fluorescent hum. Only then did I dare glance at the reflection in the metal frame of a freezer case. I saw my husband first. Daniel stood near the entrance, one hand resting casually on the handle of a cart, the other holding his phone. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like a man with nowhere else he was supposed to be. Next to him was his mother. At least that's who she was supposed to be. She stood upright, weight balanced evenly on both feet. No cane, no hesitation. Her coat was neatly belted, her hair smooth and dark, not the wispy gray she wore at home. She leaned in toward Daniel and laughed at something he said, a quick, easy laugh that carried. My son tightened his grip. "That's her," he breathed, "but she's not like that at home." I felt the words land somewhere low and heavy in my chest. That morning, Daniel had texted me from the kitchen while I was packing lunches, taking Mom to get her memory checked. Might be a long appointment. I'd replied with a thumbs up and a reminder about the prescription refill. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. The night before, his mother had asked my son what day it was. Then she'd asked again. And again. By the fourth time, he'd looked at me with wide eyes, confused and a little scared. Daniel had brushed it off, said it was part of the process, told us we needed to be patient. Now she was walking past the bakery like someone who knew exactly where she was going. I turned my cart down the first aisle without slowing. Canned soup, coffee, paper towels stacked like bricks. I pretended to study labels while my pulse thudded in my ears. We moved deeper into the store. I could feel Daniel's presence somewhere behind us, like static. I didn't know if he'd seen us. I didn't want to know. My son tugged on my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered. "She told me not to tell you." "Tell me what?" I murmured, eyes still on the shelves. He swallowed. "She said if you asked where Dad was, I should say he was out, that no one came over. She said it was grown-up stuff." I reached for a box of pasta we didn't need and put it in the cart just to have something to do. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. I kept my voice steady. "You hear me?" He nodded, but his face stayed tense, like he was bracing for something. We rounded the corner toward the center of the store, and that's when I saw them again. Daniel had stopped at the jewelry counter. The glass case glowed under bright lights, velvet trays laid out like offerings. His mother lifted her wrist. She turned it slowly, watching the light catch her skin. A sales associate leaned in, smiling, and opened a small black box. Daniel's shoulders relaxed. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. My son pressed closer to me. "Why is he here with her?" he asked. "I thought she couldn't be in places like this." I didn't answer, because I was watching the way Daniel's hand rested on her lower back, guiding her forward. Not steadying, guiding. The kind of touch you give someone you're comfortable with, the kind you don't give your mother. We moved away with the crowd, blending in. We didn't run. Running draws attention. Instead, we drifted toward the food court and sat at a table near the edge, half hidden behind a railing. My son stared at the entrance, waiting for Daniel to appear, to catch us, to say something that would force the moment into the open. I took his hand and squeezed once, then again, our signal to stay put. "Talk to me," I said softly. He took a breath. "Last week," he said, "when you were at work." She went into my room. She said she was looking for the bathroom, but she didn't need help. She walked just fine. My stomach tightened. "And Dad?" I asked. "He told me not to worry, said she gets confused. Then she told me to call her Grandma Margaret louder, like I'd said it wrong before." I pictured her at home, leaning heavily on the walker she'd insisted on using, complaining about the smell of nail polish, asking where the spare keys were kept, correcting the way my son set the table. People who are confused don't test boundaries so carefully. We left without buying anything. A bottle of water sat untouched on the table as we stood and joined the flow of people toward the exit. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. My hands shook as I unlocked the car. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, running late." Appointment took longer than expected. Mom's a little disoriented. I didn't answer. At home, everything looked the same. Shoes by the door, mail on the counter, the quiet, ordinary hum of a house that believed itself to be safe. Daniel came in late that evening carrying a pharmacy bag like a prop. He kissed my cheek, missed slightly. "Long day," he sighed. From the couch, his mother looked up and smiled sweetly. "Sarah, dear," she said, voice soft and uncertain. "Did I see you today?" Daniel met my eyes. There was a question there, a request. I nodded and played along. Later, after my son was asleep, I found the papers. They were stacked neatly on the desk, tabs marking places where a signature should go. A note in Daniel's handwriting rested on top. "Sign when you get a chance. This will make things easier if I need to help Mom." The title caught my breath. Durable power of attorney. Not for her, for me. I slid the papers into my work bag without making a sound. That was the moment I stopped explaining things away. Lying in bed that night, listening to Daniel's breathing even out beside me, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the day. My son's grip on my hand, the confident laugh, the jewelry counter, the lie that had walked past me in high heels and a clean coat. If my son hadn't pulled me forward in that parking lot, I would have turned around. I would have smiled. I would have believed the story I'd been told. And something in my life would have quietly, cleanly, slipped out of reach. The house didn't feel different the next morning. That was the problem. Sunlight came in through the kitchen window at the same angle it always did. The coffee maker gurgled. The fridge hummed. My son sat at the table eating cereal, his backpack propped against the chair leg like it had been every school day since September. Daniel stood at the counter, scrolling through his phone, thumb flicking lazily, already dressed for the day. His mother sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket even though the heat was on, staring at the television like it was speaking a language only she half understood. Normal, ordinary, convincing. "Did you sleep okay?" Daniel asked without looking up. "Fine," I said. That wasn't true. I'd slept in fragments, my mind looping through small details that refused to line up. The way she'd turned her wrist under the lights, the easy laugh, the weight of my son's hand in mine. Daniel slid a pill bottle across the counter toward his mother. "Here you go, Mom." She squinted at it, then up at him. "What's this one for again?" "For your memory," he said patiently. "We talked about this." She nodded, then hesitated. "Did I take it already?" Daniel sighed softly and glanced at me, the look carefully calibrated. Concerned son, tired husband. "See how hard this is?" I stayed quiet. At the door, my son paused, backpack on, shoes half tied. He looked back at his grandmother. She smiled at him, sweet and vacant. "Have a good day, sweetheart," she said. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You too," and left. I watched him walk down the driveway, small shoulders tense, like he was carrying something heavier than books. When the door closed, Daniel turned to me. "I'm going to be late again tonight. I want to follow up with the clinic. They said they might adjust her dosage." I nodded, still quiet. His mother shifted on the couch. "Daniel," she said softly, "I don't like it when you leave me alone." "You won't be alone," he replied quickly. "Sarah works from home today." That was new. I looked at him. "I do?" He smiled, already reaching for his keys. "Just for today. You said you could be flexible." I hadn't said that, not exactly, but the words slid into place like they belonged there. "Okay," I said. After he left, the house settled into an uneasy stillness. The television murmured. His mother watched it without blinking. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and pretended to work. Emails blurred together. I typed a few responses and deleted them. Every few minutes, I glanced toward the living room. She hadn't moved. An hour passed, then another. At some point, I heard the faint sound of humming, soft, tuneless, not shaky or uncertain, just casual. I looked up. She was standing at the window. No walker, no stiffness. One hand rested lightly on the sill as she peered out at the street, posture straight, weight balanced. She didn't notice me watching. For a moment, I stayed perfectly still, afraid that if I moved, the image would break. Then she spoke. "They park too close to the hydrant on Tuesdays," she said. "I keep meaning to tell you." I swallowed. "Tell me what?" She turned slowly, as if surprised to find me there. Her face shifted, the alertness draining away, replaced by something softer, duller. "Oh," she said. "Was I standing?" "Yes," I said. "You were." She frowned, then laughed lightly. "That's silly. My knees wouldn't allow that." She eased herself back onto the couch, reaching for the walker that had been resting just out of sight beside it. She pulled it toward her with a practiced motion and settled in, breath slightly labored. I went back to my laptop. My hands were shaking. At noon, she asked me if Daniel had gone to work. At 12:15, she asked again. At 12:30, she asked what day it was. Each time, I answered calmly. Each time, she nodded like the information was new. But when the delivery driver rang the bell that afternoon, she called out, "Daniel, the groceries are here," without missing a beat. The name hung in the air between us. That evening, my son came home quieter than usual. He did his homework at the table while his grandmother watched him with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You're good with numbers," she said. "Your father was too." He didn't look up. "You tell me that a lot." She smiled. "Do I?" "Yes," he said. "Every day." Daniel came home late, all apologies and tired eyes. He kissed his mother's forehead, asked how she'd been. She told him she'd had a hard day, that her joints hurt, that she'd felt confused. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and shot me a look. "See? This is real." After dinner, while my son showered, Daniel pulled me aside in the kitchen. "She had a rough afternoon," he said. "The doctor warned us there would be fluctuations." "I saw her standing at the window," I said. He didn't miss a beat. That happens sometimes. Adrenaline. Muscle memory. "And the groceries?" I asked. She remembered the schedule. He exhaled, the patience thinning. "Sarah, you're looking for patterns because you're stressed." I watched his face carefully as he spoke. The calm, the confidence, the way he never quite answered the question I asked. Later, when the house was quiet, my son came into my room and climbed onto the bed beside me. He lay on his side, facing the wall. "She knows when Dad isn't here," he said. "She's different then." I brushed his hair back gently. "Different how?" "She tells me not to worry, says everything is going to work out, says Dad is taking care of things." "Things like what?" He hesitated. "Money stuff, papers. She says I don't need to understand yet." I closed my eyes. That night I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake listening to the sounds of the house, the soft creak of the floorboards, the click of the hallway light switching off long after Daniel should have been asleep. At some point, I heard the faint scrape of metal, like a drawer being opened and closed carefully. In the morning, I checked the locks. Everything was in place, but something had shifted. Not in the house, in me. I stopped asking myself whether I was imagining things. I stopped trying to make their story fit. Instead, I started watching. I found the papers on a Tuesday night, tucked where they didn't belong. Daniel had gone to bed early, claiming a headache. His mother was asleep on the couch, blanket pulled up to her chin, television murmuring to no one. The house had that late evening stillness where every sound feels louder than it should. I was at the desk in the corner of the living room sorting through mail, bills, school flyers, a catalog I didn't remember ordering. I opened a drawer to grab a pen and saw the edge of a manila folder I hadn't put there. It was thick, heavy. I slid it out and felt my chest tighten before I even read a word. Tabs marked sections in neat handwriting. Yellow highlights traced sentences with careful precision. Sticky notes clung to the margins like reminders that pretended to be casual. I recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. The first page made my mouth go dry. Durable power of attorney. I sat down slowly. The language was dense, formal, the kind of writing designed to sound harmless if you didn't know what you were looking at. Authority in the event of incapacity. Financial decisions, asset management, temporary, if necessary, permanent, if required. My name was printed in clean type at the top, not as the holder, as the subject. This wasn't about his mother. This wasn't about medical emergencies or convenience. This was about access, about making me a door that could be opened if the right key was pressed. I flipped through the pages, my hand steady in a way that surprised me. Each section was flagged, each signature line carefully marked. It would make things easier, the note on top said. If something happened, something. I thought about the way Daniel had watched me when the appraisal came in months earlier, the way his eyebrows had lifted just slightly before he caught himself. He'd tried to sound impressed but not interested, tried and failed. That was when he'd started leaving papers out. Forms on the counter, articles about estate planning pulled up on his phone, conversations framed as hypotheticals. I closed the folder and sat there, listening to the television drone on. Across the room, his mother stirred. She shifted under the blanket, murmured something unintelligible, then settled again. Her face looked peaceful in sleep, innocent. I stood, walked quietly to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar, older, sharper around the eyes. I didn't wake Daniel. I didn't confront anyone. I slipped the folder into my work bag and returned the drawer to exactly how I'd found it. In bed, Daniel rolled toward me, half asleep. His hand brushed my arm. "You okay?" he mumbled. "Fine," I said. That word again. Still not true. The next day, I paid attention to the small things, the way his mother watched me when Daniel wasn't around, not confused, assessing, the way she asked questions that felt less like curiosity and more like inventory. "Do you still keep important papers in the hallway closet?" she asked while I made lunch. "I don't remember," I said. She smiled, the expression brief and unreadable. "Oh, my mistake." Later, she asked my son if he liked his school, if he planned to stay there for a long time, if he ever worried about money. He shrugged, uncomfortable. "My mom takes care of that." She nodded slowly like she was filing the information away. That afternoon, Daniel texted me from work. "We should talk about the paperwork tonight, just to be prepared." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Prepared for what? That evening, Daniel brought home takeout, his mood bright, almost buoyant. He set the bags on the counter and kissed my cheek. "I was thinking," he said lightly, "it might be smart to get things organized, with Mom's condition and everything." His mother perked up from the couch. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, voice trembling perfectly. "I just want what's best for my family." Daniel squeezed her hand. You're not a burden." Then he looked at me. "We're a team, right?" I nodded. After dinner, he pulled out a fresh copy of the same papers I'd already seen. "Just look them over," he said. "No pressure." I scanned the first page, even though I already knew every line. "This gives you control over my finances," I said. "Only if something happens," he replied smoothly. "It's standard." "And my son?" I asked. His jaw tightened just for a second. "This isn't about him." I met his eyes. "Everything is about him." From the couch, his mother sighed softly. "Sarah, dear, you're always so protective. It's a wonderful thing. But sometimes protection can look like mistrust." The words landed exactly where they were meant to. I set the papers down. "I'm not signing anything tonight." Daniel exhaled, the sound sharp. "Why are you making this difficult?" "I'm not," I said. "I'm being careful." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I'm your husband. You don't lock your husband out." Before I could respond, his mother called out, her voice suddenly thin and frightened. "Daniel, I don't feel well." He turned instantly, concern snapping into place like a switch. "I'm here, Mom." He shot me a look over his shoulder. "We'll talk later." Later didn't come. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table and opened my work bag. I pulled out the folder and read it again, slower this time. The implications unfolded quietly, methodically. If I signed, he wouldn't need to touch my son's trust. He wouldn't need to explain anything. He would simply move through me, legally, invisibly. I closed the folder and pressed my palms flat against the table. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. I froze. The sound stopped. Then, softly, the hallway light clicked on and off again. I didn't move. I didn't call out. In the morning, nothing appeared disturbed. Doors were locked. Drawers closed. But the sense of being watched lingered. At breakfast, my son pushed his cereal away and whispered, "She was in my room last night." My chest tightened. "What makes you say that?" "My door was open," he said. "I always close it." I looked down the hallway. The door stood ajar, just a few inches, enough to see inside. I felt something settle into place then, cold, solid. This wasn't confusion. This was access, and someone was getting impatient. I came home early on a Thursday, and the house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Not broken, not ransacked, just off. The air was cooler than it should have been, like a door had been opened and closed carefully. The hallway light was on, even though I was sure I'd turned it off that morning. My keys sounded too loud when I set them on the counter. "Hello?" I called, keeping my voice normal. No answer. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. His mother's walker stood where it always did, angled beside the couch, the rubber tips clean. The television was off. The silence pressed in around me, thick and deliberate. I walked slowly through the living room, noticing details the way you do when your body knows something before your mind catches up. The throw blanket was folded differently. A chair at the kitchen table had been nudged back an inch or two, just enough to register if you were paying attention. My work bag sat on the floor near the counter. I hadn't left it there. I crouched, heart steady in a way that surprised me, and opened it. The zipper was half closed. Inside, my laptop was still there. My wallet, too. But the papers, the ones I'd taken from the drawer, were gone. I stood up and didn't call Daniel. I walked straight down the hall to the closet near the bathroom, the one most people ignored. I knelt and moved the storage bins aside. They slid too easily, like they'd been shifted recently and put back with care. The safe was open. For a moment, my lungs forgot what they were supposed to do. I leaned closer. The black box sat exactly where it always had. I lifted the lid. Empty. The tissue paper inside had been rearranged to look untouched, shaped carefully, almost respectfully. Beneath it, the folder that held the appraisal and trust correspondence was gone. I sat back on my heels, staring at the open door of the safe. There was no panic, no rush of heat, just a sharp, quiet recalculation. Someone hadn't broken into my house. They'd entered it. I closed the safe and slid the bins back into place. I picked up my work bag and hung it where it belonged. I straightened the chair at the table. Then I took out my phone. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, voice bright. "Hey, where are you?" I asked. "At the clinic," he said without hesitation. "Mom's having a rough afternoon." I looked at the faint scratch near the latch of the back door, the kind you'd make if you knew how to coax it open without force. "Someone's been in the house," I said. There was a pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "Sarah," he said, a hint of annoyance creeping in, "you're imagining things. We talked about this." I hung up. My hands were steady as I dialed the number I hadn't planned on using yet, an old friend from college who now worked financial investigations. We hadn't spoken in years, but he picked up immediately. "I need you to look at something," I said, quietly. He arrived without sirens, without questions shouted across the room. He walked through the house slowly, eyes taking in what mine had already cataloged. "This wasn't random," he said after a few minutes. "They didn't take electronics, didn't touch cash. They knew exactly what they wanted." "Paper," I said. He nodded. "And something small enough to move without raising alarms." I didn't tell him who I suspected. I didn't need to. That evening, Daniel came home carrying takeout like an offering. His mother followed behind him, leaning heavily on her walker, breath shallow, eyes watery. "Oh my," she murmured when she saw me. "Did something happen?" "The safe was opened," I said. Daniel's face tightened. "We have insurance." "That wasn't insurance paperwork," I replied. "That was my son's." His mother sank onto the couch, hands trembling. "That poor child," she whispered. "Losing things must be so upsetting for him." Her eyes flicked down the hall toward my son's room, sharp for half a second, then dull again. Daniel stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "Don't make this worse than it is." I looked at him and realized something fundamental had shifted. They weren't afraid of the theft. They were afraid of what came next. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe, to the subtle sounds of movement and settling. I thought about the papers that were gone, about how cleanly they'd been taken. By morning, I understood the truth I'd been circling for days. This wasn't chaos, it was timing, and someone had decided it was time to move. I ran into Carla by accident. At least, that's what it looked like to anyone watching. I was in the produce aisle at Target, staring at apples without seeing them, when I heard my name said softly, like the speaker wasn't sure they should be saying it at all. "Sarah?" I turned and saw her standing there with a basket hooked over one arm. Carla. She looked the same as she had months ago. Neat ponytail, practical shoes, the kind of calm face you trust with your house keys. The woman Daniel had insisted we hire when he said his mother couldn't be left alone. She smiled, then hesitated, her eyes flicking down the aisle before meeting mine again. "I've been meaning to call you," she said. We stood there a moment too long, blocking traffic, until I nodded toward the end cap near the bananas. We moved together like it was planned, like two women comparing prices, instead of trading something more dangerous. "They said you quit," I said quietly. Carla's mouth pressed into a thin line. "That's what they told you?" "They said my mother-in-law accused you of stealing medication." Carla let out a short breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "She didn't." I waited. "She accused your husband," Carla said. "He said she felt unsafe with me after that." My throat tightened. Why would he do that? Carla looked down at her hands. "Because I write things down." I didn't interrupt. "Dates, times, patterns," she continued. "It's habit. When you care for someone with memory issues, you learn to track what's normal and what isn't." "And?" I asked. "And your mother-in-law wasn't confused most days," she said. "Not when your husband wasn't around." The words settled between us. "She knew how to work her phone," Carla went on. Texting, scrolling, video calls. She'd complain about her knees in the morning, then walk to the mailbox without the walker if she thought no one was looking. I thought of the window, the humming. She had this perfume, Carla added. Not old lady perfume, expensive. And her nails were always done, even when she said the smell bothered her. I nodded slowly. None of it surprised me anymore. I mentioned it once, Carla said. Just asked if maybe the doctor should know. Your husband got very quiet, then very polite. The next day I was gone. What about my son? I asked. Carla met my eyes. She talked to him like he was an adult, told him secrets, told him not to worry about money because his dad was handling things. My stomach dropped. I didn't think it was my place, Carla said quickly, until I saw how scared he was. We stood there in silence, the store noise flowing around us. Finally, she said, I'm sorry I didn't push harder. You did enough, I said, and I meant it. That night, I watched more closely. Daniel's mother couldn't remember how to work the television remote. She stared at it like it was a foreign object, pressing buttons at random. 10 minutes later, when Daniel handed her his phone to check a message, she unlocked it without hesitation. On Tuesday, she said her joints hurt too much to stand. On Wednesday, I saw her walk down the hall without the walker, posture straight, steps sure, when she thought I was in the laundry room. I stayed where I was and listened. She hummed under her breath, light, steady, not the sound of someone struggling. Later that afternoon, she leaned toward Daniel in the kitchen and said quietly, Did you talk to her yet? The word her landed in my chest like a dropped weight. Daniel's head snapped up when he saw me. His smile stretched a fraction too wide. Mom, he said loudly, remember we talked about calling me Daniel? She blinked, then softened instantly. Did I say the wrong thing? She asked, frail and uncertain. I nodded as if it didn't matter. Inside, something locked into place. That evening, after my son went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table and made a list, not of accusations, not of feelings, of facts, dates, times, who was present, who wasn't. I didn't write her name. I wrote behavior. By the end of the night, the pattern was undeniable. She wasn't losing herself. She was playing a part. And Daniel wasn't protecting his mother. He was protecting the performance. I closed the notebook and slid it into the back of a drawer, beneath the things no one ever bothered to look through. I wasn't ready to act yet, but for the first time, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And I knew one more thing, just as clearly. They thought they were ahead of me. They were wrong. I didn't confront them. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't even change the way I spoke. I prepared. The first thing I did was slow down. People expect panic. They expect anger, accusations, raised voices. Those things make noise, and noise gives cover to the wrong people. So I became quiet. I worked my normal hours. I packed my son's lunch the same way every morning. I asked Daniel how his day was and listened like I always had. I thanked his mother when she passed me the salt. I smiled at the right moments. Then, when I was alone, I moved carefully. I checked the laws for our state late one night, reading until the words blurred. Where cameras could go, where they couldn't, what counted as consent, what didn't. I took notes, then deleted them. I didn't want anything traceable, anything dramatic. The next day, while Daniel was at work and his mother slept on the couch, I ordered 2 small cameras, plain, unremarkable, the kind people use for pets or packages, nothing hidden, nothing secret. When they arrived, I installed them myself. One faced the hallway, angled wide enough to see the doors but not the bedrooms. The other covered the closet where the safe lived, its lens tucked just high enough to be ignored. I tested them, watched the feed from my phone, adjusted angles by inches. Then I sat on the floor and waited for my hands to stop shaking. I changed the combination on the safe that same afternoon. I didn't rush it. I stood there, breathing slowly, spinning the dial twice to be sure. The new numbers stuck in my head immediately. The old ones slid away like they'd never belonged to me. The contents of the safe didn't stay there long. The next morning, I took my son to school and drove straight to the bank. I asked for a safe deposit box under his name, the process handled through the trust the way it always should have been. The clerk didn't rush me. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. When I locked the box, something in my chest loosened for the first time in weeks. In the parking lot, I froze my credit from my phone. It took less than 10 minutes. It felt strange how simple it was, how something so powerful could be done quietly without anyone noticing. At home, Daniel noticed none of it. He talked about work. He complained about traffic. He rubbed his temples and said he was tired. His mother continued her performance, drifting between fragile and alert depending on who was watching. That night, as we cleared the table, Daniel asked casually, "Did you ever find those papers you misplaced?" I didn't look up. "Not yet." He nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. 2 days later, I laid the bait. I waited until Daniel was out of the room, then said to his mother, "I might have another copy of the appraisal somewhere. I need to find it." Her eyes flicked up sharp and fast before softening again. "Oh," she said. "Is that important?" "Yes," I said. "Very." That evening, Daniel brought it up himself. "There's more paperwork?" he asked, trying to sound unconcerned. "Just copies," I replied. "Nothing urgent." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The house grew tense after that, like a held breath. Daniel hovered more. His mother asked more questions, small ones, innocent ones. Where did I keep old files? Had I reorganized the closet? Did the bank ever send mail for my son? I answered vaguely, truthfully, without details. The day I set everything in motion, I told Daniel I needed to leave early to pick up my son for a school appointment. That wasn't true. I'd already updated the pickup list and password with the office. My son stayed safely at school, unaware of any change. I drove around the block and parked where I could see the front of the house without being obvious. My phone rested in my hand, the camera feed open. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then the front door opened. Daniel stepped out first, glancing down the street, his posture tense. He lifted his hand in a small, practiced wave. A car pulled up. The woman stepped out, wearing his mother's cardigan like a costume she was tired of. No walker, no hesitation. She moved fast, confident. They went inside together. On my screen, I watched them head straight for the hallway closet. Daniel yanked the bins aside with a familiarity that made my stomach twist. "Where did she move it?" the woman hissed. "I know where she keeps things," Daniel said. "Just hurry." She spun the dial on the safe with quick, angry motions. "Where's the folder?" she snapped. Daniel cursed under his breath. They tore through drawers, their movements sloppy now, frustrated. Words spilled out about buyers, deadlines, money that was already counted. Every sentence landed clean and clear. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. When they finally stepped back outside, empty-handed and furious, they didn't see me approach. They didn't see the car stop at the curb behind them. By the time Daniel turned, it was too late. For the first time since this began, I felt calm, not relieved, prepared. They froze at the curb. Daniel's hand was still on the door handle when he saw the car behind them. Not a patrol car, no lights, just an ordinary sedan easing to a stop like it belonged there. The kind of car you don't notice until you need to. The woman beside him stiffened. For half a second, her face searched for the version she was supposed to wear, frail, confused, dependent. Then a man stepped out of the driver's seat. "Daniel," he said calmly, "we need to talk." Daniel's mouth opened, closed. His eyes flicked to me, then back to the man, like he was trying to place him in a story that no longer fit. The woman tried first. She let her shoulders slump, reached for an invisible ache in her back. "Officer," she wheezed, voice trembling on cue. "I don't understand. I'm not well. My son takes care of me." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't even look at her right away. "We're here about a burglary," he said, "and a stolen item." Daniel laughed, sharp and brittle. "This is insane," he said. "You can't just—" "I can," the man replied, finally meeting his eyes. And I am. Another car pulled up, then another. Still no drama, no rush, just people taking their places. The woman's expression shifted. The softness drained out of her face, replaced by irritation, then anger. "This is a misunderstanding," she snapped, her voice suddenly younger, stronger. "We didn't take anything." The man tilted his head. "You discussed a buyer in the hallway," he said. "You discussed timing, and you attempted to access a secured safe." Daniel took a step back, like distance might help. "Sarah," he said, turning toward me, desperation bleeding into his voice, Tell them this is being blown out of proportion." I stepped forward then, my shoes quiet on the pavement. "They broke into my safe," I said. "They took my son's property." Daniel stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "You don't have proof." The man held up a phone. The screen glowed in the dim light. "We do," he said. The woman's jaw clenched. "You recorded us." "In my home," I said, "in shared spaces, legally." Silence spread outward, thick and unmistakable. Daniel's shoulders sagged. His confidence collapsed in on itself, folding until there was nothing left to prop it up. "I was just trying to help," he said weakly. "You were stressed. I needed to protect my family." "You tried to steal from our child," I said. The words landed plain and final. They separated them then. Hands gentle but firm. Questions asked in measured tones. The woman argued until she realized it wasn't working, then went quiet, eyes burning with something like hatred. Daniel didn't look at her. He looked at me. As they led him away, he said my name one last time, low and urgent, like it still meant leverage, like it still meant I might save him from what he'd done. I didn't answer. Inside the house, the silence felt different, lighter, like pressure releasing after being held too long. Later that night, when my son came home, the driveway was empty. The lights were on, the doors were locked. "Where's Dad?" he asked carefully. I knelt in front of him and chose my words with the same care I'd used for everything else. "Your father made choices that weren't safe," I said. "He won't be here for a while." My son nodded once. Not relieved, not shocked, just steady. "I thought so," he said. We sat on the couch together, the space beside us finally empty. Outside, a car drove past. Somewhere, a door closed. Life moved on. And for the first time in months, it felt like it was moving in the right direction. The house belonged to me again by morning, not because anything had changed physically. The same walls, the same furniture, the same faint crack in the ceiling above the hallway that I'd meant to fix for years. But the air was different, lighter. Like a window had been opened somewhere deep inside, and stale things had finally been let out. I woke before my alarm. For a moment, I forgot everything, and then it all came back at once. The curb, the quiet cars, Daniel's voice breaking when he realized I wasn't going to save him. I lay still and listened. No television murmuring in the living room, no soft complaints from the couch, no careful footsteps in the hallway meant to sound accidental, just the refrigerator humming and a bird calling outside the window. I got up and made breakfast. Eggs, toast. Orange slices arranged the way my son liked them, not because he demanded it, but because routine mattered, because normal mattered. He came into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, backpack already slung over one shoulder. "Is today going to be weird?" he asked. "Yes," I said honestly, "and no." He nodded, accepting that answer without needing it explained. After I dropped him off at school, I didn't go to work. I drove to the hardware store instead. I bought a lock change kit and a new keypad for the garage. Nothing fancy, just solid, practical things. Back home, I worked methodically, screws out, plates off, new locks in, the satisfying click of a bolt sliding cleanly into place. When I finished, I gathered every spare key Daniel had ever handed out. To neighbors, to his sister, to the woman who'd worn my house like a costume. I dropped them into a padded envelope and sealed it. My phone buzzed as I wiped my hands. A fraud alert. Attempted purchase declined, then another and another. A string of frantic taps at doors that were no longer open. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't argue with the bank. I closed the account, shut the door, and moved on. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a group text. Daniel's sister, his aunt, people who would hear rumors soon enough. Ethan and Margaret are not allowed at my home or my son's school. Please don't share our location. I didn't add emojis. I didn't explain. I didn't soften it. No one replied. That silence told me everything I needed to know. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. "This is a jewelry dealer," the man said when I answered. His voice was cautious, careful. "We received an inquiry about a piece that matches a stolen item report. We haven't purchased anything. We wanted to verify." My hand stilled on the towel. I thanked him and passed the information along, quietly, efficiently, the way all of this had been done. When the call ended, I sat on the floor and let myself breathe for the first time since this began. Not a sob, not a breakdown. Just a long, steady breath that reached places panic never had. The bracelet came back a week later. No dramatic handoff, no speeches, just a plain evidence bag across a desk, the weight of it real in my hands. I didn't open it right away. I took it home and waited until my son was with me at the table, homework spread out, pencil tapping absently against the paper. "It's back," I said. He looked up, eyes searching my face. "Really?" I nodded and slid the bag toward him. He didn't touch it. He just stared. "So, it wasn't my fault," he said quietly. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "It was never your fault." We locked it away properly that night, not in the house, not where familiarity could be mistaken for safety. Somewhere neutral, somewhere boring, somewhere secure. Life didn't return to normal all at once. There were appointments, paperwork, conversations that felt too heavy for daylight, but each step was small, manageable, real. One afternoon, as my son brushed his teeth, he asked, "Can someone pretend to be family again?" "They can try," I said, "but now we know what to watch for." He considered that, then nodded, toothpaste foam gathering at the corner of his mouth. That night, after he went to bed, I stood in the quiet hallway and looked around. The house no longer felt like a stage. It felt like a place you could rest. Outside, the streetlight flickered on. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. A car passed. Ordinary sounds, ordinary life. And for the first time, that was enough. We moved 3 months later. Not far. Same school district, same commute. But far enough that the air felt different when I stepped outside in the morning. More light, fewer shadows I recognized. The new place was smaller, fewer rooms, bright windows that faced east and filled the kitchen with soft morning sun. The neighbors waved, but didn't ask questions. They minded their business in the way that feels like respect. That was exactly what I wanted. The first night there, my son walked from room to room, counting light switches, opening closets, checking doors. Not because he was scared, because he was recalibrating. "This one locks differently," he said, turning the handle of his bedroom door. "Yes," I said. "You can lock it whenever you want." He nodded, satisfied. Our routines tightened. Not out of fear, but out of intention. School pickup passwords updated. Credit monitoring alerts set. Doors locked the same way every night, not obsessively, just consistently. The bracelet lived in a safe deposit box now under my son's name, handled through the trust the way it always should have been. I didn't think about it often. That was the point. Safety shouldn't require constant attention. Daniel tried once. A call from an unknown number that rang until it stopped. A message left with no words, just breathing before the line went dead. I blocked it without listening twice. I didn't need explanations anymore. The legal parts moved forward quietly. Paper followed paper. Signatures replaced signatures. Each step closed a door I didn't plan to reopen. One afternoon, as I stood at the sink rinsing dishes, my son asked, "What would have happened if we'd turned around that day?" I knew exactly what he meant. I dried my hands slowly. "Then I would have smiled," I said, "and believed a lie a little longer." "And the bracelet?" he asked. I pictured the papers that had almost been signed, the access that would have been granted without force, without noise, without anything that looked like a crime. "It would have been gone," I said, "legally." He absorbed that in silence. "So, me grabbing your hand," he started, "saved us time," I finished. "That's all." He nodded, relieved to have the weight lifted from his shoulders. Later that night, after he was asleep, I stood by the window and watched the street settle into darkness. Porch lights clicked on one by one, a dog barked and then stopped. I thought about how close everything had come to slipping away without drama, without a fight, without a single broken lock. People think danger announces itself, that it comes loud and obvious and violent. Sometimes it comes quiet, organized, smiling. Sometimes it comes disguised as family. I turned off the light and walked back to my room, locking the door behind me with a calm, familiar motion. Peace, I'd learned, isn't something you feel. It's something you build. If you've ever wondered how close a life can come to breaking without making a sound, this is it. Not every danger kicks the door in. Some of it smiles, waits, and counts on you looking away. If this story made you pause, trust that instinct. Pay attention. Ask questions. Protect what matters. Peace isn't luck. It's built, one clear choice at a time.